He humiliated his disabled wife for the sake of his pregnant mistress, but her shocking secret left him speechless. Family, friends, and loved ones had gathered for his wife's anniversary. Tables were beautifully set, live music played, and guests raised toasts to health and happiness. The wife sat in her wheelchair, beaming as she accepted congratulations, trying not to show how tired she was. She had no idea that this evening would change her life forever. Her husband looked tense, whispering something on the phone while glancing repeatedly toward the entrance. At one point, he stood up and tapped his glass, asking for silence. Everyone turned to him, expecting a toast. He smiled, but there was no warmth in his eyes. With cold determination, he said, "I have something important to announce. I can no longer live this lie. I'm leaving my wife." The room fell into dead silence. Some thought it was a joke, but he continued, "I'm going to have a child with another woman. I love her. We're going to be a family." Gasps of shock filled the room. The wife slowly lifted her eyes to him. There was no anger in them, only deep pain and disbelief. She said nothing. Tears welled up on her cheeks. Her mother stood up, trying to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. The husband turned and walked to the exit, where a young pregnant woman was already waiting. He didn't even look back. The wife remained seated, silent, paralyzed not only in body, but in spirit. The celebration ended in an instant. At home, silence hung in the air. The guests had long gone. Only the faint light from the window lit the room. The wife sat in her wheelchair by the window, staring into the darkness. On the table was untouched food from the party. Slowly, she turned her head to look at the photos on the wall. Their wedding, their travels, happy moments. All of it now felt like a lie. She slowly wheeled over to the closet, opened it, and began packing her husband's things into a suitcase. Each movement was difficult, but there were no more tears in her eyes, only calm, as if something inside her had shattered and immediately hardened. She carefully folded his shirts, his ties, and placed on top the watch she had given him many years ago. Then she closed the suitcase and pushed it into the corner. She wheeled to an old dresser in the bedroom, opened the bottom drawer, and took out a wooden box with a lock. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside were documents, letters, copies of contracts, everything she had been collecting and saving for years. One folder had his name on it. She slowly flipped through the pages, and a faint, bitter smile appeared on her lips. He thought she was weak, that without him she was nothing. But he never knew that all along she had been much stronger than he imagined. She closed the box, placed it on her lap, and rolled over to the table. There, she boiled water, made herself a cup of tea, and for the first time that evening, took a deep breath. There was pain, but now, with it, came resolve. That night marked the end of one chapter of her life and the beginning of another. The next morning, she called his lawyer and asked for a meeting. Her voice was calm, without a trace of trembling or reproach. She arrived at the office herself, accompanied by a caregiver. Her husband was already in the room, lounging smugly in a chair. Next to him sat his pregnant mistress, holding his hand and glancing mockingly at the ex-wife. He didn't stand up, didn't even greet her. He simply said, "You still can't let me go. Please don't make a scene." She nodded, and without looking at him, handed the lawyer a thick folder of documents. The husband at first ignored it, but when he saw his name on the cover, he grabbed it. As he flipped through the papers, the expression on his face began to change. First mild surprise, then confusion, and finally fear. Inside were documents proving that the business he was so proud of and believed to be his was actually registered in his wife's name. And according to the terms of their prenuptial agreement, in the case of infidelity, he would lose not only his share, but all rights to the property. The folder also contained printed messages, photos with the mistress, and receipts in her name, all paid for with the company card. His hand trembled. He looked at the lawyer, hoping for help, but the man just shrugged. Everything was legal. The mistress shifted uncomfortably, now glancing nervously between the wife, the folder, the lawyer, and the man she had once called her protector. She no longer held his hand. In fact, it seemed like she was looking for the quickest way out. The wife remained silent. No anger, no triumph, only calm. The silence in the room was excruciating. Finally, the mistress stood up, adjusted her purse, and walked to the door without a word. The husband tried to call out to her, but no sound came. She didn't even turn around. The door shut quietly behind her. Now only 3 people remained: the husband, the wife, and the lawyer. The husband finally looked up at his wife. His eyes were filled with despair, pleading, even regret. He tried to speak, but his tongue felt frozen. She looked at him calmly, with a touch of sadness. "I believed in you. I thought you were my strength, but you turned out to be a test, and now I've passed it." He wanted to argue, but he knew it was too late. Everything had been decided. Everything was signed. His words would change nothing. He no longer had power, not over her, not over the situation, not even over himself. The lawyer stood, gathered the documents, and left them alone. The wife slowly rolled to the door, paused, and without turning around, said, "You didn't just lose me. You lost everything you had. And the worst part is, you chose this." She left, leaving him in silence. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be truly alone.